If you're buying a home, one of the results of the settlement between the National Association of Realtors and the plaintiffs in the Sitzer-Burnett class action lawsuit is the requirement of a broker-buyer agreement. As of this time, the settlement still needs to be court approved. However, if approval is given, one of the things you'll see is a buyer-broker agreement. Now, what exactly is a buyer-broker agreement? Do you even need a buyer's agent? What do you need to know if you're a buyer as you're looking to purchase a home? That's our topic in today's video, and we're going to get started right now. Before we get started, understand that compensation has always been and always will be negotiable. Setting a standard commission is a violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act. Let's take a moment and talk about how agents used to be paid and how the commission lawsuit came about. If a seller wanted to sell a home, they would contact their favorite agent and the seller would sign a listing agreement. In the listing agreement, the seller would agree to a listing price, when the listing would start, when the listing would end, and in the listing agreement, the seller would also agree to a compensation fee paid to the listing broker. A seller has plenty of options. The compensation could be a flat fee, it could be a percentage of the final sales price, or it could be a combination of a flat fee and a percentage to be paid to the listing broker. The compensation is always negotiable. Typically, the listing agent would then market the property in the MLS. The MLS stands for Multiple Listing Service. It's a database of all the homes for sale. The MLS is an amazing tool for agents. Imagine if you were buying a car and you could go to one source with all the cars for sale. You could look for a car from any company, large or small, and then you would have a salesperson who was looking out for your best interests, guiding you through the process. When an agent lists a home in the MLS, the agent offers a cooperating commission or shares a portion of the commission with the buyer's agent. Now, again, this is negotiable. If you're a seller, your best friend is an agent with a buyer. When an agent lists a home, the agent has a fiduciary duty to the seller. The listing agent is looking out for the best interests of the seller. The seller and the listing agent sign a listing agreement. In the listing agreement, it gives the agent permission to market the property. It has the price of the home, when the listing starts, and when the listing ends, and how much compensation is to be paid to the listing broker. One of the new changes will be in the listing agreement. If a seller decides that he wants the broker to share a portion of the listing commission with a buyer's agent, it will clearly state that in the listing agreement. Again, nothing says the seller has to offer the buyer agent compensation. However, if a seller is savvy, the seller is going to understand the power of offering compensation to a buyer's agent. Okay, let's look at an example. Let's say the total compensation charged to the seller is $10,000. In the listing agreement, it will say the total compensation is $10,000, and let's say the seller is offering $5,000 in compensation to the buyer's agent. That's a good thing because transparency is good. Before the settlement, this compensation was not typically disclosed to the seller. Now the seller and the listing agent can have a conversation about if the seller wants to offer compensation to the buyer's agent and how much in compensation. Again, all compensation is negotiable. Starting in July of 2024, one of the new requirements of the settlement, the listing agent can no longer advertise a cooperating commission in the MLS. Can the listing agent still share a portion of the commission with the buyer's agent? Yes, but it just can't be advertised in the MLS as a result of the settlement. One of the reasons the lawsuit occurred in the first place was about the cooperating commission. The seller felt that why shouldn't the buyer pay for their own agent? And that's a legit question. One of the reasons why you want to offer a cooperating commission is for incentive. If you're a seller, it makes sense to incentivize a buyer's agent. If you're a seller, you want to sell your home for the most amount of money in the shortest amount of time, and you want to get as many eyeballs as possible on the property and as many agents excited to bring a buyer. And you do that through offering a cooperating commission. Now I'm going to tell a little personal story here, and that is about a month ago, I sold one of my rental properties in North Omaha. I could have sold it for sale by owner. I know how to do that, and I could have handled the sale completely by myself. Could I have saved the commission by selling it myself? Absolutely. I could have advertised it on Zillow. I could have went to a title company and got a packet of information. Did I do that? No. Why? Because I'm like any other seller. I want as much money as possible that the market could bear. And the way to do that is through marketing the home through the MLS. Now, could I have paid a buyer's agent less? Sure, I knew commissions were negotiable, but did I? No, because it makes sense to incentivize a buyer's agent representing the buyer. In fact, the last thing I would want to do is to sell it myself. Why? Number one, people have a natural distrust of agents, especially when an agent is selling their own property. The second reason is because of liability. This was an older home. This was a home with issues. I was grateful the buyer had a home inspection. I was grateful the buyer had their own agent and their own representation. Guess what? During that home inspection, they found some stuff wrong. And guess what? I had to make some repairs. I even had to put in a new furnace. Everything was disclosed. Selling a home is not fun, especially if you're a seller. It's going to cost money. Now, here's the deal. I bought that property 20 years ago for $55,000. I had it rented for 20 years and I sold it for around $170,000. I made out just fine. Now, looking back, my mistake is I should have bought more of those, but I was a little bit too conservative. I held it too long, and I probably should have done a 1031 exchange sooner. I wish I had an agent back then encouraging me to buy more. Now, when I bought it, did I get a great deal? No. It sounds like a great deal, but because it's $55,000. But guess what? Back then, that was market value. Now, looking back, would I have been okay if I would have paid $60,000 for that property? Let's say I paid 10% more for that property. Would I have made out okay? Absolutely. Now, did that value of that property fluctuate? Of course it did. I bought it around 2003, and 5 years later, it was probably worth less during the great financial crisis, because guess what? Property values fluctuate. But guess what? I didn't take a loss because I wasn't selling it. So I had a long-term outlook. Looking back, I wish I would have had a little bit better agent, back then I didn't see value in an agent. I was an investor and I thought I really didn't need an agent. In fact, I didn't even really like agents. I had purchased about 8 properties at the time, so I thought I knew what I was doing. But at the time, I didn't realize I didn't know what I didn't even know. Looking back, I would have purchased a much different property. Now, it still worked out, but look at things much differently at age 34 than you do at 54. I look at it like paying my taxes. I pay someone to do my taxes. The money I pay is worth, because guess what? It saves me more money in taxes than doing it myself. In life, you don't have to be smart. You have to find smart people. Now, it's hard to find smart people. The trick is to find smart people. A great agent is like a great tax person. They'll save you more money in the long run than they cost. Starting in July of 2024, agents will not be allowed to advertise compensation in the MLS. I am sure there'll be some sellers out there who decide not to pay compensation to a buyer's agent. I really think that's short-sighted but again, here's the deal. Commissions are negotiable. You don't have to pay a buyer's agent if you don't want to. In fact, you don't even have to hire an agent. You can sell it on your own. You can sell it for sale by owner. You don't have to pay a compensation to anyone. Starting in July of 2024, agents will be required to get a signed buyer agency agreement before showing a home. A buyer-broker agreement is a contract between a buyer and a buyer's agent, which spells out the terms and conditions of their working partnership. It's similar to a listing agreement when someone lists their home for sale. A buyer-broker agreement will say exactly how much the agent will be paid and the terms of the payment and the length of the contract. Again, this will spell out all the terms. Buyer broker agreements are nothing new. In the past, they were not required. Now, as a result of the settlement, it's a requirement. If you're a buyer, read the agreement. You have choices. Every agent will have different terms, and remember, compensation is negotiable. The terms are negotiable. I think one of the good things about the settlement is that more consumers will understand that commissions are negotiable. What you see in the press is you'll see that the standard commission is dead. The press doesn't even know that commissions have and always will be negotiable. Before you sign that broker-buyer agreement, read the agreement. Find out what the agent will do for you and exactly how much it will cost and exactly how long the agreement is. Vet your agent. Look at their reviews on Zillow. Go to LinkedIn. Look at their Facebook page. And if they have a YouTube channel, check out their YouTube channel. If you're a buyer and if you have to pay for representation, you want great representation. It's just like going out to eat. Nobody says, hey, honey, let's go find that average restaurant. No, people want to go to a great restaurant. Now is not the time to hire someone who does 2 deals a year part-time as a side hustle. You want someone who is full-time in the business who knows the market. Don't be pressured to sign the agreement. Take your time, read it over, interview several agents, ask some tough questions. How long is the contract? How will you be paid? Is there a minimum commission? How much do I owe if the sellers offer compensation to the buyer's agent? How much do I owe if the seller is not offering compensation to the buyer's agent? What if I'm unhappy with your services? And then is your fee negotiable? You also want to work with someone you like. You want to have a good fit. This is a big decision. There's going to be lots of great agents in our marketplace, and you want experience too. However, keep this in mind too. Some agents might have 10 years of experience, but they've been in their first year 10 times. What about just calling the agent off the sign? Remember, the agent on the sign represents the seller. They have a fiduciary duty to look out for the best interests of the seller. You would be a customer and not a client. In Nebraska, there's a thing called dual agency, and that is where the seller can represent both sides of the transaction. Now, it's legal in Nebraska. In some states, dual agency is not allowed. However, do you really think someone can represent both sides equally? Let's say you're buying an older home and there's a big old maple tree in the front yard. Do you really think that listing agent who you called off the sign is going to suggest a sewer scope inspection? If you're a customer, you have no representation. And if you're relocating, your job is going to be even tougher. Speaking of relocation, be sure to check out the next video because I go over 25 essential things you need to know before relocating to Omaha.